Good day, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Journeys and Transformation, where we take on a really interesting topic, the world of experience. You know, in the work that we've done with our clients across so many industries in digital transformation, we're finding one critical success factor across those, and that is experience as the true north, experience as the compass, experience as the design criteria for how we actually drive digital transformation. And today I wanted to explore that idea. I wanted to spend a little bit of time thinking about what does that really mean? What are the pitfalls? What are the great things that can come out of it? And then I actually explore a framework so we can all use it, kind of the step 1, step 2, step 3 approach. And to do that, I've invited, as before, a set of diverse leaders with deep perspectives and experience that have come out of experience and work they've done in a variety of different areas. And I'm very pleased to now introduce them to you one by one. First, I have Bhavna Devalapalli, and Bhavna joins us from Chicago. She is the Chief Information Officer at Ventas, which is one of the leading real estate investment trust companies in the world. And they're focused on using experience as a way of driving differentiation. It's an area that's not new to Bhavna, I might just add, because previously she was a CIO at Hyatt, and I spent some time with her in her role at that time. And I know that experience is the core and center of some of the transformation she was driving. So we're looking forward to hearing from Bhavna her perspective and experience and some of the pitfalls and the benefits that come out of it. Bhavna, welcome, and thank you for joining.
Thank you, Sanjay. It's great to be here.
And you know, Bhavna, just so people can get a quick sense for you in a sentence or two, what is your top priority at Ventas?
Great. So as you mentioned, Ventas is one of the leading real estate investment trusts. We focus heavily in the healthcare area, providing capital to senior living, healthcare providers, and research institutes. So a big area of focus for us is really being able to use data and analytics that we have to inform better decision making.
Okay, we're going to come back and explore that a little bit more. That's fantastic. Let me just introduce our second guest speaker, which is Eric Nelson. And Eric joins us from Seattle today. He leads the experience strategy and the plan for Microsoft and their business operations. I'm really interested in actually double-clicking on that with Eric, because we've all thought about experience in the context of user interface, and clearly at Microsoft, as in any other software company in the world, that's a large component of what we do. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're going to get into experience as it relates to service, as it relates to business interactions, and we're going to look forward to kind of getting some perspectives from Eric. Eric spent 20 years in this area. He was previously the Chief Information Governance and Privacy Officer, which I think is really interesting because the data and analytics is such a large part of experience and experience strategy. And so with that, Eric, welcome. Please come online. And then I've got a quick question for you because I want people to get a quick sense for you as well. I know you're big on multi-channel experience. What does that mean?
Well, I think multi-channel experience is really about meeting the customers or your partners where they are and helping them accomplish the goals that they want to accomplish or need to accomplish, as opposed to a lot of times we think about it from our own terms and what is the product we're trying to sell, as opposed to what's the outcome they're trying to achieve, and meet them where they are and attempting to do that.
And I suspect you're doing that across multiple channels, from the software itself to all of the other different interactions, to phone, in person, and so on and so forth. Is the idea that it's much more complex because of all of those different engagement points?
Yeah, it's end to end. It's the touch points that those interactions and engagements that they have in multiple areas, and how do you reach them so that you can help them achieve what they want to achieve and what they need to accomplish.
Excellent. So we'll look forward to double clicking on that a little bit more. And really, Eric, would be great for us to learn from some of the steps you guys have gone through at Microsoft and learning that's come on the back of that. And we'll get to that in a minute. My third guest is one of my colleagues here at Genpact. It's Dave Cowing, and Dave joins us from New York today. Dave's actually the leader for our experience business within the company, which is to say that he drives the work for most of the clients that we serve in this one area. He came through the acquisition of a design thinking, journey mapping, and an experience management company that we closed a year and a half, 2 years ago. And since then, he's been on board and he's leading the effort for us. And I think what I what I find really interesting in the work that Dave does and his team does in the bits that I get to see is the breadth of perspective and the footprint across many different industries. And Dave, we're counting upon you to bring out for us, some of the success stories, some of the horror stories, so we can get a better appreciation for that. Dave, welcome.
Terrific. Thank you, Sanjay. And needless to say, I'm super excited about the conversation today.
Awesome. Well, let me ask you this, just one quick question up front so we get a sense for you and your thinking. What's kind of the number one question you get, Dave? I mean, you've been at Genpact for a while now and you've been driving experience. Question number one you get always.
Yeah, so it's actually super interesting. I actually think it depends on the client. We have clients that are more mature and less mature in this space. For the more mature client, it's how do I scale experience? How do I drive consistent experience across a large organization that might be organized by product, business line, functional area, whereas my customers, my employees touch all of those areas. For the less mature customer, the less mature client of ours, it's really a question of, how do I, why do I need to understand my customer? I just want to get started. I want to deploy something. I know my customer, and taking them through that journey of you have a hypothesis, you may need to learn more.
Fantastic. And as we work across that span of clients and users, I think it's really important to meet their needs for where they are in that part of the journey. So we'll come back to you on that. Okay, folks, we're going to get started. I mean, this format, I think we've all known sort of it's just straight talk, quick, fast. We'll keep it moving around the topics. And as I said, I have 3 topics I want to explore. First one, what is experience? And I'm going to just go around and just get opinions and ideas from you. I mean, and just to set that up, I mean, we've always thought about software UI. And that's well understood now. I mean, it's been around for decades and we've sort of kind of gotten to a point where that's a very mature science, so to say. But we're not expanding that into a much broader field of operation in the context of experience. Bhavna, let me start with you. What is experience?
Yeah, I think about experience as kind of the overall story or the song. So what is it that you are left feeling at the end of it all is, so we talk a lot about process and features and functions, but to me, experience is kind of that end-to-end storyline that is pervasive.
And give us an example of that. Again, I mean, I think I can interact with a software and experience what the software feels like, but in the context of hospitality or current business, give us one real life example of what experience feels like.
Yeah, I think experience is very personal, and it is about sort of that feeling, a human interaction. So, if I think about it in hospitality and having that online experience before I show up and all of that translating to when I show up at the front desk and people knowing all of that information that we've had before and making that a very personal experience based on what they know about me, both in that stay and previous stay. So it's turning it from a transactional experience into a more human long-term relationship experience.
Wow. And we all travel, so I think we can understand what you are suggesting there. And it's got to be an interesting balance between running the analytics to understand the client that's coming in and being able to give them the experience they need, but not going too far over into sort of that, I know too much about you. Have you come across that? Is that an issue? How do you think about that?
It is. And I think all of us as consumers know that our information is out there and it's being used. And I try to equate it to, I used to go visit friends and I used to drink a lot of Coca-Cola. And I had friends who would always stock up before I showed up. And it never felt creepy because it was really kind. It came from a kind spot. And I think when you go in with that mindset of, I really want to make this a great experience for you, you get it right more often than not. When you think about, how do I use this data? How do I use the fact that I know that you drank 1.5 Coca-Colas a day the last 5 times you stayed, and how do I monetize that? I think you end up getting into that creep factor, and it's in your face that they knew it and they're tracking this information about you. So I think it really is coming from a place of wanting to create that great experience and making it as natural and human as possible. And I think especially when you start getting into hospitality or in the senior living space that we're in, there's that jump from an online experience to an in-person experience. I think it becomes really, really important because, you're talking about people feeling safe in their environment and feeling really in touch with the people around them, and you've got to draw that fine line and be really respectful of what people are looking to have.
Well, I think for me, it comes down to help. I was always taught, you add help to every sentence. And if you think of it in terms of how are you helping someone, then you're probably helping them. They probably figure you were thirsty. So they, if you look at it from, they were trying to help you not be thirsty, and they know what choices that you wanted. And that's an ideal customer experience.
Yeah, this is a really interesting topic, which is how do you take experience to the point where we're really meeting a client's need for where they are at that point in time, and not crossing the border into that creepy word, as I think you used, or some variation thereof. So we'll come back to that. And Microsoft, software company, user experience, clearly get it. What's going on in business operations, and what is experience in the context of business operations?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we all know about in this day and age is that change is inevitable. Change is the only thing that we can actually count on. So from a Microsoft Business Operations perspective, we are actually about launching and managing change. And so how do we provide an ideal experience in that environment so that we can, and at times when we can directly bring in a customer or in a partner in some cases where we want them to actually give us direct co-design like feedback on here's what we're changing, here's how we're thinking about changing it, and getting that feedback directly from them. There's many chances to get that directly, but there's also a lot more chances that we aren't going to get that direct feedback. So how do we get their voice involved in the design of that and delivery of that change? And so that's what we're working on. What I'm designing is that framework that allows us to understand the change, design the change with their needs in mind, so that we can land it, the most efficiently and as well and satisfy, again, helping them accomplish their goals and their wants and needs.
And Eric, what's an example of some of these changes? I mean, we're talking about contracts and terms, or we're talking about interaction, policies, discounts.
We look at we definitely look at that end to end, business experience, as you said, not product experience. And so it's all about onboarding. They're signing up to do business with Microsoft in some way. They're purchasing something from Microsoft. They're selling through Microsoft. So how is it that they're able to onboard easily and start selling as quickly as possibly, or start utilizing that software that they're purchasing, or maybe they're renewing an agreement that they have with us, and so how can they do that seamlessly and not have interruption of service, things of that nature.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. We'll come back and explore a little bit more. Dave, your thoughts?
Yeah, some phenomenal topics. First, Ivana, the term song, I love that, right? Thinking through experience is kind of the sum of all those interaction points, and it when it works, you get something that's magical and musical, and when it doesn't work, it breaks down rapidly. I think, to me, one of the things that's really interesting, and this is why I loved becoming a part of Genpact, is you often think about, in the space I've lived in, is okay, what does it take to understand the needs of users and translate that into digital interfaces? The challenge with that is you can think about your experience if you're a business employee, consumer, it's more than that, right? It's impacted by operations down under the surface. It's impacted by person-to-person discussions. And to really think through how you impact a user's experience, a customer's experience, you need to attach all these together. You need to think about, well, maybe I need to improve an operation under the surface. So Eric, you mentioned onboarding. Last year I spoke to a commercial bank. They would stop thinking about the relationship once they got done, kind of sign the contract on sales. Their average time to onboard the customer was 300 days. And they asked the customer for the same documents over and over. And there were two issues with that. One is it's a really poor experience. So the only thing that can happen at 300 days is I might elect to make another decision to find another bank. In the meanwhile, I haven't started earning money as the bank. So good experience is good business.
Okay, those are, wow. I mean, each of those three thoughts we could spend an hour exploring. I think, Bhavna, your point about meeting experience needs to the point that it just feels natural, not too much, not too little. I think this whole idea of business experience, Eric, as opposed to product experience, which is a much more holistic idea, And then Dave, your idea about end-to-end and requires all of the components of the interaction to be able to look at full. And of course, I think you're alluding to the work around digital transformation, which necessarily is around business transformation, and as a result, has to have an end-to-end. Okay, so I think that's a great summary for the first part. We're going to move into the second part. And what I want to do is, for the benefit of our audience, just bring out what are some of the successes that you've experienced? What are some of the pitfalls you've gone through that we can learn from as an audience? And we'll just go in whatever order makes sense. Maybe Eric, this time around, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think some of the successes really is more of a realization that this is a journey, as Dave mentioned, that there's a maturity, and for us, it's really all about the fact that we're on our own journey around experience, and so how do we just get an understanding of our customer, who is the customer that we're talking about, and so being able to stop and get this picture around who are and what is the segmentation. We talk about personas, we talk about journey maps in a lot of places, things that we're going to talk about later, but really getting a better understanding and putting this framework in place has allowed us to get data from multiple places that was maybe not available because we weren't born in the cloud, and there's a lot of disconnected areas for our data that sits, and being able to tie that in is a monumental effort. So being able to standardize and centralize the data that we're collecting and the voice of customer and voice of partner that we're collecting, and put that into a place that we can now utilize that and bring that data and that insight to bear as we manage this change. I'd say that's one of the successes we've had.
Eric, just a quick question on that, because this whole journey for clients of ours and people in the audience today that have come from traditional industry, so to say, and as the born in the cloud category of companies that's resetting the standards for interaction and engagement, right? And that journey from the traditional model to the new model, so to say. How did you get that started at Microsoft? I mean, how do you even fund it? How do you budget for it? How do you think about the strategic role of it? And how do you get people on board? Any learnings that we can use elsewhere?
Yeah, I think from a Microsoft perspective, we're a very large company with very many different components, and so it's a long-term investment, long-term journey, and you start someplace. And starting within Microsoft Business Operations is one area where we have this unique situation, this unique position of seeing this end-to-end change that happens, and being able to launch that change out into the ecosystem, whichever ecosystem it is that it happens to be. So it's really this kind of long-term view, and so it's hard to say. It's finding a place to start is, like I said, identifying who is your customer, who is your partner that you are trying to serve, and you're trying to help them achieve their goals. Is really the place to start. Otherwise, we try and boil the ocean. We try and connect data, behavioral data across all these different places in the infrastructure, and then the budgets go go crazy, and and then that's when executives start to get nervous. Am I spending my money in the right place? And this experience thing doesn't really work. That kind of thing. So it's really critical that we don't try and boil the ocean to begin with.
Okay, great. So Bhavna, let me pick up from there. And so we're not going to try and boil the ocean. We're going to get some successes in place. What learnings, what advice, what guidance from your own personal experience when it really works well, and then some of the pitfalls to avoid?
Yeah, and I think that's a great point that Eric made about starting somewhere and not trying to boil the ocean. I think that one of the big things we've learned is to test a lot. And so identifying who the customer is, but not being overly presumptive about what that customer wants. So one of the challenges with getting so much data is you feel like sometimes you know a lot more than maybe you entirely do as far as what that experience is going to play out as. And so I think to get something out, get real feedback. And we have the benefit of being able to put things out into test markets, whether it's in a subset of locations or whether it's to a subset of our online partners or customers, and being able to get feedback from the real customer and knowing how to really listen to it as opposed to doing it as a check the box, I think is so critical. And I see a lot of people do it and they've already got the idea of what they want to do. And I think you have to really be willing to listen to what people are telling you.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Thank you for that. Dave, I know that a lot of, and you mentioned this earlier, a lot of the work you do is actually not just around influencing the software product or the digital experience, but actually the end-to-end process experience. And that's been a large part of, I think, what you've been preaching inside the company and helping our clients with. Talk to us a little bit about some of the successes, some of the pitfalls there.
Yeah, I think there's two parts to that. One is this notion, I alluded to it earlier, of not assuming you know the user or the customer. So being willing to go out and do research. I love contextual inquiry, sitting with customers in their environment, understanding what they do, bringing those insights back. But then point number two is when you're thinking about making decisions in your transformation, do I optimize a process? Do I build an interface? Do I look at a legal contract? Those conversations are tough. And if you put the voice of the customer in the center of it, it makes it a lot more of an objective discussion as opposed to a subjective internal discussion. So I think if I think about big lesson learned there, and I had a client, it's really one of my flagship clients in this space, a banking client that when we first started working with them, they had a lagging product and had market share, and they said they didn't want us to do any research. So we said, okay, fine. We actually did a couple of stealth pieces of research in the early phases, just, an interview or two, brought the data back, couple of key findings. Fast forward to today, we continually do new research every quarter, and that particular client is every day into our platform looking at videos of customer research, and his decisions as a product manager tie back to the customer constantly.
Oh, so that's kind of interesting, and we don't want to get into products and what we do, but I think you introduced a really interesting idea, which is the need to actually get some customer feedback. But in the use of the word platform, and I don't want to go into the platform necessarily, but this notion of a systemic, methodical, structured approach, right? And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think it's one is you can get data from all sorts of sources about your customer. So I mentioned one technique of gathering qualitative data. You can pull in quantitative data. I think the trick for a small organization is pretty simple, right? You have a set of people, you can get them in a room, you can talk about it. But as you scale to bigger organizations, and I think everybody on the call can relate to this, how do you take that and amplify that, bring that out to a bigger organization? Because you've got so many units in an organization with different agendas, you've got to have a system for storing and talking about customer data. And this is where really two techniques become critical to this. One is journey mapping. I think a lot of people may be familiar with. How do you take all of your data and map it into the lens of a journey, which may be a day in the life of, it may be a process such as onboarding, a structure that allows you to talk about the data in the context of the user, as well as personas, right? That typify your archetypical or stereotypical users and allow you to say, Jane would like this, Joe would like this, and sort of humanize them through the process. So I think adding in techniques like that can help you to have the conversations. And that's a little bit of the cultural shift. So you can kind of keep coming back to who is the user, what are they trying to do? And then number three, how is what I'm doing going to impact it?
Okay, fantastic for that setup. We're all now set to get into the third and the most important part of the discussion, which is a framework for how we approach that. Before we do any of that, I'm going to change gears a little bit. I'm going to throw a couple of quick questions at you. It's meant to be a rapid fire, so no more than one sentence response, please. And it's really just to get a sense for your thinking and get some quick answers back from you. So here's a couple of rapid fires. First one, and I'll call out the names, but look, you guys are all thought leaders in experience. You've got a whole background built on this. I think my audience would be really interested in find out what's a great app that is a favorite of yours that we can relate to and kind of get a sense for you. So Bhavana, for you, what's your favorite app?
Alexa.
Alexa. Okay. All right. Eric, how about you?
I'm going to go with TurboTax.
That's not what I expected, but okay. I'm with you. My experience is all negative experiences, not in TurboTax, but what it connotes, but either way.
That's why it was a good experience. That's why it's a great app.
That's a fantastic point. That's a fantastic point.
They
Dave,
helped me get my taxes done.
Great. Good response. Dave, how about you?
Yeah, mine is Fresh Direct. It allows me to do my grocery shopping from my refrigerator.
Wow, I haven't seen that, so I'm going to make a note and try that out myself. Thanks for sharing that. So we talked, my second question is going to be relating to something I think a few of you said earlier, which is, how do you get data? And I guess you can get data from contextual research into humans and do interviews and those sorts of things. And you can obviously got a ton of sort of transactional systemic use data. And so in this world of, human-centered experiences and just tons of data that are now becoming available, which one do you go after? Eric.
Well, I go after data. You got to be.
I had a feeling you were going to say that, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had to, right? I mean, it's data, but it's all about what kind of data and what how much time you spend going after that data.
Okay, all right. We'll hold on to that. Bhavna, how about you?
I'm going with context and the contextual aspect of this.
The human experience part. Wow. Yes. And how about you, Dave?
Well, I love data. I think ethnography, contextual research can provide you with such a breadth of insight and findings that you weren't necessarily looking for.
So you're talking about depth and anecdotal and sort of the colors on the landscape. Okay, that's great to hear. And obviously, I think in so saying, all three of you really just said that it's a combination of those two things, and you can't do without either, and then you prioritize between them. So I think that's great to hear your personal sort of leaning on some of this stuff. One last question, and it'll lead into the discussion next, which is how do we get a framework put in place? What's the top challenge? I mean, what's the top challenge for a CEO or a chief digital officer or one of the CXOs in your companies or yourselves on experience? If you had to boil it down to one thing, what's top of mind? Dave, how about you?
I think it's the culture of the customer, the culture of the employee. How do you bring that data in? And how do you not just have that be superficial, but percolate through the entire organization?
Okay, culture. We're going to take a note of that. Bhavna, how about you?
I think it's trying to make it individual, but operationalize it on a broader scale and really think about it end to end and not hyper focus on one aspect of the experience.
Great set of points. End to end, I think, is coming up over and over again. So it's a great point. Eric, what's the one thing you worry most about?
Getting started. Basically, I've got this word called experience. Oh my gosh, what is experience? Where do I get started? Everybody tells me I need to do experience. I don't know where to get started.
Okay, that's fantastic. I couldn't even have planned the questions better because you ended up exactly where we want to start the third segment. So let's shift gears. Where do we get started? What is step one, step two, step three? I am new to my role at a Fortune 500 company, and among other things, I own the experience, quote unquote. How do I get started? Eric, since you ended your comment that led into this question, why don't you start?
Yeah, I think getting started is, and I mentioned it before, it's about getting to know who is your customer and how you want to segment the different customers. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we've come across is everybody's got their own understanding of who the customer or the partner is, and how are we going to go about identifying that in a way that allows us to document but also manage the change, because again, we're about managing change here and introducing that change, and we have to be able to segment our customers or our partners so that we can ready or deliver that change in a way that's consumable.
Okay, awesome. Bhavna, how about you? How do I get started?
So I think, again, starting with the customer is critical, and moving from a bit more of the B2C to B2B world, it's also knowing your customer's customer and understanding what they're trying to achieve. And then I think thinking about who we are and where can we offer something differentiated. So I think it's kind of marrying the two of what's our strength that we bring that could be different about this experience for the customer than our competition, and where can we take advantage of that most effectively gives us a great place to start.
And how do you sort of balance all of that? I mean, do you pull together a team? Do you use the existing organizational components? I mean, this feels like a large, I think the culture word came up earlier, feels like a large cultural change for many corporations. Any sort of insights from your experience on how to drive change in that dimension?
It is a huge culture shift. I think that you find champions within the company who are already there. I think you find partners or segments of your customer population that are more ready to make the move. And I think as people see real successes and you can start to tell that story more broadly in a place that's meaningful to the industry you're in, the context you're in, and it becomes real, and you can draw a straighter line from where you are to where you want to be, I think you get a lot more credibility.
It is so true for all of the work we see in digital transformation, but you're right, it actually starts with experience, and it's so true for experience, that change management process and the small wins up front that lead to the bigger successes downstream. Let me change gears. Dave, how about you? I mean, you've done a few of these things and across industries. What's a great framework to get started? Step 1, step 2, step 3.
Yeah, I think, first of all, think about the scale. So starting small can be important. I think if you think about steps, it's starting with what I would call experience strategy. Understand the customer, tie it to needs, and it can be small. Get something done, get something launched, whether it's change in operation, creation of a digital interface. Find a quick milestone, a quick win. If you have an organization that doesn't really understand, to Eric's point, kind of what is this experience thing, I think you need a quick win and how to tie it back to the user, and then measure. I think the notion throughout the process needs to be start with the customer, implement something to meet their need, and then measure it. And it can be user feedback, it can be testing, it can be hard data. But continue that cycle, and then continue to take bigger circles as you iterate.
Folks, this is a topic that we can spend probably another hour discussing and still not get done with it. The reality is that if you think about the turnover in the corporations, you look at the S&P 500 and sort of how many companies have sort of come in and gone out. The reality is there's significant sort of transformation that's happening and significant disruption that'll come on the back of it. I think we're all saying the same things, which is experience is going to be one of the largest drivers of how you digitally transform and sort of evolve your business model to the, I think you used the word born in the cloud, but new disruptive business models more broadly. And I couldn't thank you enough for being with us. I'll ask for one added favor. This will go on LinkedIn. And as always, many of our audience will want to participate in this conversation. And if they come up with questions or inputs, I'd like for you to please take a look at that. So if I could ask for that, that would be great. But thank you for joining. It's a fantastic conversation. And we look forward to having more discussions and engagement and the next steps forward. Any last thoughts from you guys? And then we'll close the call.
I'd say my final thought is, back to the same thing that I've been saying is ask the question, do I know my customer? And go and get data. You probably don't.
Okay, Bhavna?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that experience is a great differentiator, and to continually validate your assumptions throughout the process is so important.
Awesome. Eric, you get the last word.
Yeah, and I think in this day and age where it's so quick, so easy to understand or to see impact, see change, things that happen, they immediately get posted, and really having this view of your company, your business as a brand, and being able to manage that brand by meeting the customers and or partners or whoever those personas are, where they are, and I just would say reiterate help. If we insert the word help into all of our interactions, how can we help them? I think that it'll help to form that culture that we want to achieve and bring that experience to life.
Awesome, folks. There you have it from the CIO at Ventus, the leader for experience for Microsoft Business Operations, and our own business leader for experience at Genpact. Thank you all. Thanks for listening in. Look forward to the next series. Bye-bye.